Welcome back, Bird Gang fans, to the Red Phantom podcast, where we'll be talking everything involving the Arizona Cardinals. This episode will focus on my reaction and thoughts about the game against the Washington Commanders, as well as the upcoming game against the San Francisco 49ers. So let's jump straight into last week's game. Now, I'm going to change it up just a little bit and talk a little more about thoughts and reactions rather than going through, each drive like I have been the last couple of weeks, just because, let's be honest, there's really nothing to talk about. The Cardinals weren't great at all this last week against the Commanders. Commanders blew us out. I mean, what more can you really talk about? Majority of the games was punts, turnover on downs, not scoring. I mean, you can't really do much with that. So, I mean, the first half was, not that great. I mean, you go out first quarter, they score, you score, tie game. Everyone's thinking, oh, it's going to be a shootout. They score again, and then we couldn't get anything going on offense. Pretty much the same thing that happened 2 weeks ago against the Lions. Just immediately after the first touchdown of the game, we could not do anything else the rest of the game. Punt the ball. Jaden Daniels gets his first turnover of his career, throws a pick to Garrett Williams, and then couldn't convert on that. Just awful play calling, awful decision making. And then, right before the half, Cardinals go down, couldn't convert on 4th and 1. It's just, I don't know. A lot of Cardinal fans were not happy about how this half went. And then ended off, the Commanders went and kick a field goal to make it a 17-7 game. You go into the second half, everyone's thinking, oh, we need to stop against this team to make it somewhat close. Well, they go down and score a touchdown. Jaden Daniels runs the ball for like 9 yards for a touchdown. And then, of course, the Cardinals can't do anything. They punt again. Commanders score a field goal. Finally, we score a touchdown a little too late. It's 14-27 at this point with James Conner running the ball in. Commanders quickly respond, touchdown. We fumble the ball with Michael Wilson fumbling. After somewhat of a offensive moving drive, I don't know. Commanders respond, score another touchdown, just to rub it in, and then end the game. Trey Benson runs the ball out, gets 50 yards on that final drive. And I don't know. Watching this game was just awful. And, I was at the game, so it was awful being there in person. I mean, everyone left literally at the start of the fourth quarter. I think majority of the Cardinal fans left at the 7-minute mark after they scored their last touchdown for the Commanders. And then, obviously, you've even seen all over social media, like, Commander fans going, "Let's go, Redskins!" And then, the chants and everything. And even the Commander owners were there, and they were like, wow, look at the fan base. They're showing up to outbeat the Cardinal fan base here. And it's just like, God, we are 1-3 now. Like, how? We played so well against the Rams that, like, it gave us so much hope that we would continue being better and scoring more and whatever the case may be. Granted, the Rams, team was very injured, very depleted. I mean, really no superstars except for the defensive line, I would say. And just awful showing the last 2 weeks. I mean, the Lions, everyone kind of expected that we were going to lose that game. I mean, it was a close game, 7-point game, 13-20 into the score. And, everyone's like, oh, well, if we can keep a one-possession game against the Lions, we can just really run this Commanders team to the floor. And, I talked about it last week. Commanders had 4 sacks the first 3 games of the season. And then here they come in getting another 4 sacks against the Cardinals. And it's like, how? We held the Lions to 1 sack last week with our third-string right tackle. We hold the Rams to 1 sack. And, the Bills are the Bills. We got 4 sacks from them, so it's, But 4 from the Commanders? Really? And they didn't even have that great of a defensive line. And I watched the game, and just Kelvin Beachum just keeps getting beat. And I made a post before the game, and it was like, oh, Kelvin Beachum's activated. This is great news, because we needed a right tackle. But watching him play, dude, he cannot beat someone who's faster than him. And I have fear for next week, or this Sunday, I should say, with Nick Bosa. And, the Niners are going to do everything in their power to make sure, Nick Bosa is getting the best matchup possible. So they're probably going to put him more on his left side going against Kelvin Beachum. And, God, I mean, if it's like how it was last game against the Commanders, the the Niners might actually run up double-digit sacks on us. I mean, it was horrible. And, I even talked about this, and I know a lot of other Cardinal people have talked about this, but our free agents really haven't done much. And I know you could argue, like, Evan Brown is doing great. You could argue that Mac Wilson is doing phenomenal, but Sean Murphy-Bunting's not doing anything. Justin Jones just got injured, and he wasn't really doing much. Bilal Nichols isn't doing much. And then you go on and you look at our offensive line, and God, I mean, like, Jonah Hernandez is out, and it's just one of those things where it's like, what do we have to do to get this team good? And there was something that came out, I think from Bo Brack or something like that, one of the Cardinals reporters, and he was talking about how Jonathan Gannon came out and said, yeah, we feel great with this edge threat pressure. Really? We didn't have a single sack against Jaden Daniels, and we barely had a sack against Jared Goff last week. And, the Rams game's the Rams game. We played phenomenal that game, and we had a lot of sacks there with Dennis Gardeck. But, like, our edge group sucks. Our defensive line is not that great. I mean, granted, Dante Stills is playing better at the defensive tackle position, and it's only a matter of time before Darius Robinson comes back, but we have to get something going with our edge threats. And I don't know if it's going to be trading, for Hassan Reddick, who's been in a bunch of trade rumors now that Devontae Adams wants out from the Raiders. Is it going to be Max Crosby, who maybe wants out from the Raiders if they start sucking really bad? I mean, there's been other trade reports about getting B.J. Ojulari's brother, Azeez Ojulari. And, God, I mean, anyone right now would help. And I know the Cardinals just re-signed Zaven Collins to a 2-year extension. And great for him. I mean, he's a great rush defender, but he's just really not getting much pressure off the edge. And I think a lot of Cardinal fans knew that. And a lot of Cardinal fans were really hoping that, B.J. Ojulari would play and, that Darius Robinson would play right out at the gate. And then both of them get injured, so we don't really have pressure. But then you look at Jared Verse, and you have to wonder, like, should the Cardinals have traded up to get Jared Verse? And maybe I'm overreacting just looking at our defensive line, but something has to change. And now, like, with all the injury reports coming out, Garrett Williams might not be playing this week against the 49ers, which would be a huge loss, because now we have to play with Sean Murphy-Bunting and Starling Thomas, and, we have to go on and play with Max Melton, who I think a lot of Cardinal fans are excited to see play because, rookies are always exciting to watch play, whether it be good or bad, just because we're getting to see something from them. And speaking of rookies, Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't even really get targeted that much in this Commanders game. And the Commanders' defense, like I said, has been horrible. And the fact he didn't even have 50 receiving yards in this game is just blows my mind. And, he had 5 receptions for 6 targets, great. He had a touchdown, great. But literally after that first touchdown of the game, literally the entire offense fell apart. And, Marvin Harrison's been great getting the first touchdown of the game in every game that we've played. But, God, something has to get going. And whether it be Kyler Murray, whether it be the offensive line, whether it be play decisions from Drew Petzing, I don't know. The game cannot solely rely on James Conner. If it does, this team's not going anywhere. James Conner still had a really good game, rushing 18 times for 104 yards and a touchdown. But if he gets injured, man, our offense isn't going to be doing anything. Trey Benson's been doing decent. Amari DiMercado's been playing decent, but they're not on the level of James Conner. And you go on and look at Kyler Murray. He ran the ball 1 time. 1! For 3 yards. And, God, there's a whole stat watching Kyler Murray run the ball, and every time he runs less than, I think, 10 times, we lose. We're 0-14-1 every time he runs less than 10 rushing attempts. And I told people this in a group chat that I'm in. Why is Drew Petzing making Kyler Murray more of a pocket passer quarterback? That's not who he is. Even from Oklahoma, even from when he played in Allen, Texas in high school, even, just watching him his whole career, he has never once been a pure pocket passer. And I don't know why now Drew Petzing is deciding to make him a pocket passer, because he's not. He runs the ball. Granted, he tore his ACL and he's, injury prone, but that's literally the whole point of his game is he runs the ball. He protects himself, makes plays out of nothing. And the fact that you're limiting him to not run the ball and looking him to make them pass more, it's not going to work for this offense. And, watching him come back last year after his ACL tear, his run was the biggest point of our game. We were one of the top offenses in last year when Kyler Murray came back because of his ability to run the ball. Joshua Dobbs didn't do anything. Clayton Tune didn't do anything. The minute we got Kyler Murray back, bam, rushing attack was on point. Bam, passing attack was on point. Kyler Murray was doing stuff. And now you're restricting him to pass the ball. And we've seen it the last 2 games now where he's passing. And granted, he's doing a great job passing. But you take away his run ability and it's like nothing happens anymore. That 4th and 1 play in the first half against the Commanders should have easily been converted, whether it be you hand the ball off to James Conner, whether you let Kyler Murray improvise and take off for an extra 2 or 3 yards or whatever the case may be. How do you let him get sacked on 4th and 1? And I know my frustrations aren't just me, because this is everyone else talking too. Everyone else is saying, Cliff had a phenomenal game. Now they're turning on Kyler Murray saying, is Kyler Murray the problem? I don't think he is, but I think a lot of Cardinal fans are losing faith just because of how well Jaden Daniels is playing with Cliff Kingsbury. And granted, it's the first half of the season. We all know how Cliff plays in the first half of the season. We saw it with the Cardinals. He went 7-0 with the Cardinals and then immediately fell apart, and we went 11 and whatever it was, 11-4, 11-5. I don't remember. But it was just like looking at this game, I don't know what it is. And it might be, wide receiver separation. It might be run game not being there with Kyler Murray. I don't know, but just something is not clicking with this team right now. And whatever it was against the Rams, we need that back. And I don't know if it was just because the Rams were so injured that we played phenomenal, but just watching the last 2 games, especially this last game against the Commanders, and I'm going to keep talking about them because of how recent the game was, and it's, in everyone's memory, but God, they had one of the worst defenses in the league, and the fact that Cardinals were getting destroyed by them by offense was just horrible. And, I figured the Cardinals defense against the Commanders offense wasn't going to do much just because it's Jane Daniels, and, he's going to make plays out of nothing like Josh Allen did, but God, come on. Like, Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, and then you have, your backup running back with Jeremy McNichols, and then you have Omadai Zacchaeus with 6 receptions for 85 yards. I mean, these are players that on the Cardinals probably wouldn't play. And the Commanders are making them look like they're all-star players against us. And, granted, a lot of it is Jaden Daniels, his ability to move around and improvise and do whatever he can, but why isn't Kyler Murray doing that? I mean, a lot of people, even in the NFL, a lot of people didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to be that great of a quarterback, and now he looks like he's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year this year with how great he's been playing. And I want to see what Jaden Daniels did more with Kyler Murray. And I don't know if that's going to be, changing up plays with Drew Petzing, or even, worst comes to worst, we fire him and bring in another offensive coordinator. But, God, I mean, this offense was just, I don't know. It's not there. Defensively, I mean, what more could you really do? I know the Rams, they played phenomenal. The Lions, they played great in the second half. The first half, not so much. This game, horrible. And like I said, it's Jaden Daniels. They can't do anything against a scrambling quarterback. Our D-line's not great enough to be putting pressure on Jaden Daniels. And even when he does, they're not great enough to sack him or bring him down when he scrambles. It's just not going to happen. Leading tackler was Budda Baker with 15. Great. Garrett Williams played great. Roy Lopez had a couple of tackle for losses and tackles here and there. Mac Wilson had some great plays here and there. Kaiser White had some great plays, but God, we need more defensive ends or defensive tackles, whatever the case may be. We need corners, absolutely. I mean, you guys watched the game. Sean Murphy Bunting gave up a 50-yard pass interference on the ball. It was way overthrown, but it is what it is. We still would have gotten whooped. And, just, God, it just, something has to change. And I know this team, like I said, they're playoff contenders because our division's not that great. I mean, Seattle's 3-1 right now because they lost to the Lions Monday night. But, I mean, with how injured the Rams and the 49ers have been, there's no way that we should be tied for last right now. I mean, granted, our defense isn't great. Our offense should be top 15 in the league, and we look like we're bottom 10. But it's just one of those things where it's just chemistry. It's building up. Frustrating games here and there, and maybe it was a bad game on Kyler Murray. I mean, we saw it a couple weeks ago with the Ravens. I mean, they lost to the freaking Raiders of all teams. And I don't know. It could be just one of those flop games, and maybe we come back and beat the Niners next week. Or who knows. But something has to get going. I mean, I would hate to say that it was a flop because it was really bad. But at the same time, we didn't really do much against the Lions, and we had every capability of going out and beating the Lions last week or 2 weeks ago. And it's just one of those things where you look at this team and you go, the offense is there, but something is missing. And whether it be Kyler Murray not using his legs enough, whether it be they're relying too much on the run game, I don't know. But, defense is still defense. Nick Rawls is doing the best he can with the group of guys that he had. We promoted Angelo Blackson to active roster. He immediately goes on practice squad IR the next week. It's just, we have to get better players. And I know this isn't the year we're going to win the Super Bowl. And I know this isn't going to be the year, where we go out there and do whatever the case may be to, maybe make the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe we could be like the Lions when they started rebuilding, where they started off really crappy and then barely missed the playoffs. Who knows? But it's one of those things where Nick Rawls is doing the best he can with the group of guys that he has. And we've seen it over and over again. We saw it with the Rams. We saw it with the Bills. We saw it with the Lions. Now we see it with the Commanders, kind of, because, Cliff is just a great offensive coordinator for the first half of the game. And who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Cliff will be an awesome offensive coordinator for the rest of the season and change the stereotype that he's only a first half coach. Even though we've seen it multiple times, even in college, he was a first half coach. But who knows, maybe we'll see something change with Cliff. And, great to see Cliff, with his everything going on, come back and, win the game. But it sucks because it was against us in a blowout loss. And I don't know. Just something has to get going. Something has to change. Whether it be, like I said, Kyler Murray, whether it be being too reliant on the rushing attack, more passing attack, making more plays, offensive line holding their blocks, whatever the case may be. But something has to change. I mean, defensively can't do much until either the trade deadline or whatever else the case may be. Maybe next year in free agency when we have over $120 million in cap. But that's going to conclude my thoughts and reactions about the Commanders. I know a lot of other Cardinal fans, like I mentioned, have a lot more vocalness going out there, whether it be with Kyler Murray, whether it be with Drew Petzing, whether it be with offensive line, specifically Kelvin Beachum, whether it be, Marvin Harrison not getting enough targets like Malik Neighbors is, or, whatever the case may be. But, God, yeah, something has to change. And it's hard to watch these games and be faithful that something will change. Especially now this is the second game that Kyler Murray's been held under 10 rushing attempts. And just watching this game, I mean, you have to get him more involved. And I'm going to keep saying that because there's no way you shouldn't keep him involved with the rushing attack. I mean, I don't even remember the last time we saw Kyler Murray run a read option. And I know, a lot of teams are coming in to scheme the Cardinals and say, hey, Kyler Murray is the guy to watch out for on handoffs because he could take off with the ball. But I haven't seen any, read options. I haven't seen any, big RPOs where Kyler Murray can take off and throw the ball or scare the defense and be like, oh, look, here I am, bam, 50-yard touchdown Marvin Harrison, or whatever the case may be. Like, watching that Rams game, and I'm going to keep going back to this, when Kyler Murray was mobile, outside of the pocket, doing what he could, things were happening. The Lions game, inside the pocket. Commanders game, inside the pocket, nothing's going. No rushing attack for Kyler Murray, no deep threats, no putting pressure on the defense now that he's outside of the pocket, but I digress. Anyways, I'm going to move on from this Commanders game. It's in the past, and we're going to talk about this upcoming game against the 49ers. So this Sunday, we have a big matchup against the 49ers, like I mentioned previously. 49ers are 2-2, losses against both the Vikings and the Rams, which is our one win this season against the Rams. But this is going to be one of those games where our offense, if they have a spark, needs to have that spark this game, because this could potentially propel us back into playoff potential or make us go right into thinking about next year's draft class. And the reason I say that is because the Niners are very, very injured. I mean, Deebo Samuel just came back from injury last week, played decently. And then you have Christian McCaffrey, who's been out with bilateral Achilles tendonitis, and now you have Jordan Mason running the ball. So, their backup running back. George Kittle, I don't think is playing this week. I could be wrong, but he's also injured. Brandon Ayuk has not been playing great. And you have Juwan Jennings, who, hit or miss. And then just looking at the team, I mean, defensively, our offense is going to have a hard time just because, I mean, you have Nick Bosa, you have Fred Warner, you have Travarius Ward, you have Hufanga, you have, Devondre Campbell, who hasn't been playing great, but still one of those veteran presence. You have Leonard Floyd, and then just everything on that defense. I mean, having one of the better defenses in the league. I mean, last week they had, 6 sacks, 7 sacks, and 2 turnovers against the Patriots. Granted, it's the Patriots, so, I mean, you can't really expect much there, but, God, the Niners, I mean, their defense is nothing to mess around with, and, you look at our defense against their offense, and even with all the injuries that the Niners have on offense, if we can't stop Jordan Mason, we are getting destroyed. And the reason I say that is because Jordan Mason is second in yards for rushing this year behind Derrick Henry right now. And even though he is the backup running back, he's been playing great for the 49ers. And, looking at everything going on, I mean, the Cardinals' defensive line is ranked either last or second to last in rushing yards. And that's not something you want to see with the team go with a high rushing attack like the 49ers. And you go on and, you look right now, Brock Purdy is one of the top passing quarterbacks in the league. I think he's like second or third passing-wise yards. And, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And just everything going on with that team is clicking, even with all the injuries. I mean, granted, you lose to the Vikings. The Vikings are probably going to be Super Bowl contenders this year, just with how everything's been flowing with them. But you lose to the Rams on a very, very depleted Rams team, very, very depleted 49ers team. Juwan Jennings almost has like 200 receiving yards, and I think he has 3 touchdowns for Brock Purdy or something like that. But, if you're comparing stats, the 49ers offense is definitely more productive, but you have to look at everything. I mean, injuries are one thing, play calling is another thing, and it really comes down to the defense. And I don't think the Cardinals' defense is going to stop Jordan Mason from running 5 yards on average a carry, where, the 49ers defense might stop James Conner and hold him to 3 yards a carry or whatever the case may be. They're going to be looking a lot at Marvin Harrison. They're going to make Kyler Murray throw a lot more to, Trey McBride. They're going to throw a lot more to Michael Wilson, hopefully. Maybe Greg Dortch. Whoever else he can get in the lineup. But you have to have Marvin Harrison as a factor in this game specifically, just because he's the 4th pick in the draft. And you drafted him number 4 for a reason. I mean, I know I said last week you don't necessarily need to force him the ball every game like the Giants do, but in some way, shape, or form, I mean, you can't be giving him 20-yard passes every single game. I mean, he's not going to have that every single game. And there was plays last week where, the pocket broke down and Marvin Harrison was wide open, or Kyler Murray was looking at a different target and Marvin Harrison's wide open for like an out route, a comeback route, a slant, a drag, whatever the case may be, and instead of throwing it to double coverage downfield because big plays look better. But you have to somewhat know that this Niners defense isn't a team to mess around with, and every play matters. You have to get some yards in every single play, and I know that's like general common sense in football, but against this 49ers team, like, you have to get some yards every single play, because if you don't, you set back, and then the 49ers defense looks at it and goes, great, we have them in position, let's start doing different things. Let's send Nick Bosa off the edge with Leonard Floyd. Let's have, other linebackers and other corners blitzing, and have Nick Bosa one-on-one against Kelvin Beachum or one-on-one against Paris Johnson. But you have to have some consistency with making at least 1 or 2 yards every play. And I know football, you're going to have tackle for losses, you're going to have sacks, especially against this defense. But as best as you can, you have to keep it somewhat going, keeping things clicking. And for the last 2 weeks, I mean, nothing's clicked. And it scares me because I feel like this 49ers defense is definitely a lot better than the Lions defense. And I know for sure it's a hell of a lot better than the Commanders defense. But if we can't get anything clicking, I would say in the second quarter, because we always score in the first quarter for some reason. After that, the second quarter is just a complete shutout for us. We don't score in the third quarter, and then we score some points in the fourth quarter. So if we can't score anything in the second and third quarter, we are not winning this game, because we are not going to be able to stop Jordan Mason from running the ball. And I know a lot of Cardinal fans would agree with me watching Jordan Mason run the ball, because they've played some tough competition. They've played the Jets, whose defense is great. The offense, not so much. They played the Vikings, who are great, or spectacular, I should say, and he still ran all over them. They play the Rams, and he completely carried the game for the 49ers until they lost to the Rams. And then you watch him last week against the Patriots, and he went crazy against the Patriots. So that's the one thing the Niners have. You shut down their run game, all of a sudden Brock Purdy has to rely on Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Dwan Jennings. If George Kittle plays, George Kittle, and you have to make him force passes. But again, Brock Purdy, not necessarily known for his scrambling abilities, but he can still run the ball. So there has to be some pressure, there has to be some blitzes, there has to be some one-on-one. And granted, Zaven Collins or Dennis Skardak is going to be going up against Trent Williams, and Trent Williams is going to be a future Hall of Famer one day. You have to make, moves around Trent Williams, because no one's going to get pressure on Trent Williams with this defensive line as it is right now. And, there's a lot of things going on, and with how injured the 49ers team is, like, the Cardinals do realistically have a chance to win the game, but the chances are so slim that I can't see them winning against the 49ers. And it's going to be one of those games where maybe it's a close game, just because every game against the 49ers is close, except, a couple games here and there. But if the game is close, I think it'll put us back into the category of, maybe the Cardinals are good and they just had a couple of crappy games here and there. But just looking at how the team played against the Rams as a divisional rival compared to the last 2 weeks was day and night. And for them to come out against the 49ers this week, they have to have that same, confidence that they went in going against the Rams, saying, we're going to win this game against this team, and we're going to play hard every single down, and we're going to make sure that we do what we do and go out and make plays left and right. We bring pressure. We bring the house. We look for the one-on-one coverages. We use Kyler Murray to run the ball more, and whatever the case may be, that's what the team needs. We don't need what we needed. We don't need what we saw the last 2 weeks. And going on from there, like, you have to, like I said, use Kyler Murray in more rushing attacks, whether him, play action, roll out to the right, or moving him outside of the pocket to look for plays downfield, but something has to get going. And, Nick Bosa, like I said, is going to be one of the big factors for the 49ers this game. And if he comes in like they did with the Commanders last week, he's going to have multiple sacks this game. And, maybe they double team him like they did against the Lions with Aiden Hutchinson. Who knows? But it's going to be one of those games where there's going to be a lot of scheming. There's going to be a lot of planning around certain players. And I think we're going to see a lot more, front seven blitz, whether it be, Kaiser White, Mac Wilson, Zaven Collins, Dennis Gardeck, or even like more defensive line heavy fronts. But just something has to get going to stop Jordan Mason, because if Jordan Mason takes off, it's going to be a rough day of sledding against the Cardinals to stop this 49ers offense. But with all that being said, I'm going to say the 49ers probably win, and they're going to win by 4 points, I would say. And I think it's going to be a close game because the Cardinals are going to come back and play a lot tougher with all the negative attention going on with them, with Kyler Murray, with Drew Petzing, with Nick Rallis, with the defense, whatever the case may be. But it's still going to be one of those games where, the 49ers are going to pull it out somehow. And, it's going to be, how the defense plays against Jordan Mason. And I do think they're going to play well against him. But with how Brock Purdy is and how he's been playing so far, it's going to be a mismatch, whether it be stopping the run or stopping the pass. So I think the Niners will win by 4 points. I think the final score is going to be, 35-31 or something like that. But I think that's going to end this week's podcast. I know it's a little bit longer than it has been the last couple of weeks, but from there, we'll have to see what the offense does this week. We'll have to see what the defense does this week, specifically Jordan Mason, specifically, Sean Murphy-Bunting against Brandon Ayuk, who hasn't been playing very well. Well, neither of them have been playing very well, but who's going to be the better player come this Sunday? How Kyler Murray does, if there's more scrambling with him, how James Conner does against this 49ers defensive line, and just how Marvin Harrison does with the 49er defense, because it's going to be a tougher defense than, a couple other teams that he's faced against, but they should be looking more his way this game. But that's going to end this week's podcast. I'll see you guys next week after the game. Like I said, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all those are going to be options to listen to this. Listen on the go, on Spotify, podcast, whatever the case may be. And we'll tune in next week, see how the game goes against the 49ers. Look into next week's game against the Packers, which will be another tough matchup. But we'll talk more about that going forward. But this is the Red Phantom signing out till next